a lot of people have heard my story about how I kind of got started with the weights, or not kind of, I did get started with the weights. And that was my old man. He introduced me to him. He was around him for a long time. He was really familiar and comfortable around free weights. And so for me, what that meant was dumbbells, barbell. We had probably, I begged him for, and we got an easy curl bar because at the time that was all the magazines, all the guys were using an easy curl bar for their tries and buys.
Oh yeah. Skull crushers,
yes.
biceps,
all of that. Yes. So, but it was really mostly different versions effectively of these barbells and dumbbells. So I think I remember, telling people it was like, it started with like the inch and an eighth, just round bar that actually had if you can picture this, it had a sleeve over it. So it was like you had the bar itself, which was just cheap, probably, pot metal, as we used to call it, like junk metal, like an alloy of some kind put together. And then it was painted. It always had like a black paint. This is before powder coat, right? So it was painted. And then there was actually a steel sleeve that slid over that, right? And then you had a collar on either end, like an inside collar that you had to adjust to the sleeve. So you wanted a little movement in the sleeve, so the bar rotated much like they do now with the bearings and the sleeves on the outside, but this was on the inside because the bar, once you attached your weights to the bar or the plates weren't easily spinning around the bar. So if you got to moving with any kind of
the screw bar?
No, we did have one of those too in terms of but you're thinking the same way because the bar is fixed. So when you grabbed onto that bar, the weights had to move around the bar. Unlike grabbing, say, an Olympic bar now, you've got the sleeves that sit over the end, and they've got either bushings or bearing inside, and the bar sits still while the sleeves spin. But the point of that I guess what I'm trying to say is I was very familiar with the different, barbells and dumbbells. And so when I got my very first gym membership, and I remember it vividly, it was right here in town. We went over to this place. Shout out to Joe Gigantino. Everybody knows Joe Gigantino, Weights and Bars. Check out Weights and Bars if you're local and need some equipment. Yeah. He opened up Foxworthy Athletic Club. I was right over at Foxworthy and Cherry. I know that probably doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but it's where the Longs Drugs is sitting now. And the building didn't look like that then. It was effectively like maybe 3 or 4 retail spots that had walls knocked out or doors inserted into walls so that you were moving through all like Tetris, through this thing. And it was a ton of cardio equipment in there. And there was, probably a line, if I can remember, as a line of like Nautilus equipment. I might be wrong. But then there was like the weight room where you went in and there's the mirrors and then there's just a conglomeration. It wasn't like you walk into a lot of facilities now and they have the entire like setup of, all matrix equipment or flex. They don't even have flexing. Flex isn't even around, but hammer strength, the salt, all these different things. This was just like a conglomeration of stuff. And I remember walking in there going, dude, this is heaven. And look at all this stuff around. But at the same time, I was like, wow, there's a lot of shit in here I haven't seen. But I was anxious to use because I had seen it in magazines or whatever. And that was like the cable equipment that existed. And it was like, that's a pec deck over there. Right. And then, that quickly evolves into look at all these really cool pieces of equipment you can sit down on, and they do have to work for you in terms of having to load weights on and off. So going back to that 1 1/4 round bar, every time you wanted to change your weights, literally through your sets, you had to have a wrench to undo the collar, to then take the collar off, to put more weights on, or weights off, weights on, then put the collar back on and tighten it back. It was a lot of work.
I can see how you just didn't want to increase by 5 pounds.
No, it was like, no, that's why we just go like, if I'm going to do the work, 20 pounds is going on here.
And load it.
Yeah. So I remember being enamored by seeing all the selectorized equipment, selectorized being the stuff you sit down on. It's got a cable and a weight stack and it does stuff, for you. So of course,
it's either plate loaded or stack loaded.
Yeah. I think it was 15. I know I had started high school. I think I was 15 is about like maybe somewhere in my freshman year. And, the first thing I fucking did was I did every chest machine in the room, right? Like I probably did 3 or 4 sets of each. Cause like, I was this
felt so good.
Well, yeah, and it was like so much less work. Like I didn't have
candy store.
Yeah. It was like a candy store. It was great. So that was just looking back, and then a lot of the stuff was foreign to me and I picked it up over the years, that being the cardio equipment or whatever else. But that was my experience and it was a really positive one.
It's almost like the novelty.
It was a
right?
total
like
novelty. I could not wait to go back. It was like going to an amusement park because every time I went, I could try a different handle on a cable machine or, do the things that I'd seen in the magazines or whatever. And I was not afraid. I was going right to it. Like
you were lifting in your garage with your dad.
So, yeah. So exactly. So I have this like this whole like play set, like to erector set, if you will, of stuff to kind of play with and figure out. And it was a really good time for me. I remember that being a really positive experience for me. And then as I walked into other gyms and saw different things or less things, I could really make sense of the lay of the land and figure out how to put together a really good workout for myself based on, again, my hands-on experience. It's not the case for a lot of people. I want to get into that. So, but I mean, I know you guys, we've all shared our experiences in the past. Jeff, I mean, what was your first experience in the weight room?
So mine was very similar to yours. My first gym membership was to 24-Hour Fitness Super Sport. And so I went through there and I was doing a lot of dumbbell and barbell at home. My parents had like a little small gym, very small. So I was doing what I could in there and what I'd seen and kind of just trying to manipulate. So when I got to the gym and I saw these back machines, I don't know what it was. I love the chest machines. Don't get me wrong, but we're not going to go over that again. The back machines for me though, were these different angles, the high, low, the low to high. They felt better. They felt that I could push more. Obviously you have 3 plates on one side. You're not rowing that much. Right. But it was a great way to increase my force production without stabilization. And over time, like I didn't really understand that when I first saw these machines.
You just knew you could do more weight.
Yeah. So exactly. You're sitting there rowing 3 plates being like, dude, I'm badass.
Throw another wheel on.
Yeah. Right. Like you don't understand the levers and the horizontal, like you're really not lifting that much. Right. But at the same time, I saw a huge application for hypertrophy, for bodybuilding and for different injury, right? Different aspects of the movement. So for me, it just opened up, yes, the barbells, dumbbells, obviously are going to be superior. But if we have someone that's injured or someone that has a different goal, obviously we have equipment that can...
You picked up on that right away.
Which was weird for me. And I picked up on it, but it wasn't apparent to me until like 3 years down the road, where it was like, I was doing a lot of 5x5 stuff, a lot of strength training, and then I was assisting it with the equipment. And it just didn't become apparent until I was doing that and then seeing the gains from the assisting and kind of taking my joints out of the equation, right? Where I don't really do that anymore. If my joints are in the equation or I'm like, I need to take my joint out of the equation, there's obviously something I need to work on. Right. So that's kind of where that progression has happened. But
gotcha.
The back machines were like the thing for me.
It's machines. I mean, the machines, because again, they're like, this is cool. I want to try this. It's like, especially if you're into cars or into mechanical stuff at all, you're like, ooh, look at it. Like, what does this do? And every one of those machines, so they had like a silhouette with the anatomy chart on
where
it, right?
It works. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and highlighted the muscles. Yeah. Like, I want those.
Triceps. Yeah.
I want those. So I just get down there and start pushing away or extending away on it. And you're like, and you immediately felt it. So it was like, I had no problem like jumping on these machines and making sense of it. Okay. I'm making that connection with the picture mechanically. I kind of have a mechanical brain. I've worked like that anyways. This is kind of idiot proof. Like, let me get on here and go. And I didn't need, that's again, like Cece's looking at me with big eyes, like,
because I know what she wants to say right now.
You said idiot proof. There's no such thing in anything.
Are they fit for everybody, Scott?
Yeah. So we'll get into that. So, but what I found was I was getting a result. I was very new, right? In this whole process, I was getting a good result. And so I gravitated to those a little bit more over time. Anyway, Cece, what about you? Same, different?
Yeah. So I'm sitting here thinking about the first time I was in a gym and I think actually the first time I had a gym membership, and that was probably back in 2006. And what are we in now?
22.
Yeah.
Don't do that math.
So, I mean, it wasn't honestly that long ago, I don't think, because I didn't grow up around the gym as far as where I was living in the Midwest. And so, like I had mentioned on our previous podcast, there was a gym, but it was in the boys' locker room in high school. And so girls' sports, we did calisthenics. Yeah, right. And so, being an athletic training major, I was exposed to the gym at the university level for athletes, but I never felt like it was awkward for me. I never felt out of place. I think it just because I had really good mentors and teachers and the cohort of my classmates. I mean, we just all got along. And so I don't ever really remember feeling intimidated. Yeah. I mean, I think the first time I actually was in a gym where I utilized it for myself, it was for a required PE class in undergrad. Mm-hmm. And it was a bunch of selectorized equipment. I think there were some dumbbells and stuff, but yeah, I mean, until I started working as an athletic trainer, and really being embedded in, the collegiate scene is where I was really more around weights. And then when I made the transition from athletic training into personal training and coaching, then I was in a gym, Yeah.
Gyms for a long time were like tons and tons of equipment. Like, so if I take my experience back to the corporations that I worked for in the past, I mean, in some of those gyms, we had 40, 50,000 square feet of space, right? It was a lot of space, and they were full of equipment.
Yep.
But it was also, you had an aerobics room, you had a cycling room, you had a Pilates or whatever the utility or piece of equipment was that they were using in that room. But it was a lot of stuff. So there was all kinds of different lines of equipment, a lot of cardio. I mean, massive cardio.
You're buying full pieces of these sets.
Tons. So you're getting the whole thing. So like if a full line of equipment has, let's say 30 to 40 pieces, these gyms had multiple lines from multiple different companies. That's just the way it worked out. Plus there was some old stuff mixing with some new stuff. But I guess to the point was, people would walk in and the machines were a lot of times the path of least resistance. And I mean that in a couple of different ways. One, for the person that had never worked out before, or quite frankly, didn't really like working out, but knew they needed to be there, or was just trying to do the bare minimum to kind of be emotionally and or physically, psychologically satisfied or gratified by the things that they were doing. And maybe even intimidated, they could choose the line or the line of equipment that was along that back wall that kept them out of, kind of the public eye, where they could sit there and kind of do their own thing, be left alone.
They're not in the mirror.
They're not necessarily in the mirror. Well, I mean, we even had women's only rooms within some of these facilities.
With the women's only machines, right?
Exactly. So it was very, very specific to
a lot of people probably don't remember that.
No, man, I guarantee you they don't. That's why I'm bringing it up. It was wild. And, but for the same reason, I guess we had that there. We had those there because it made, a certain demographic maybe feel more comfortable. Absolutely. Or at least that's what the thought was. And I guess with that, it was the path of least resistance was both for two things: the members, right, and the salespeople, because it was really easy to sell gym memberships by just simply walking them through like a line of equipment and going, "Hey, see all this? The instructions are there. See that little card? It'll tell you exactly what it is. Let me show you how easy this is to do, Mrs. Jones. So we're going to sit down on this leg extension or knee extension machine here. You're going to sit down. All you got to do is pull this little bar down over your hips here. And then you're going to reach over, just simply pull the pin out, choose the weight that suits your needs best. Again, it's huge fucking gray area there, right? Right. And then what you're just going to do is you're just going to extend those knees, right? And we're going to get those right up. Or Mrs. Jones, have a seat. Let me show you how that works. Doesn't that feel good? Can't you feel your quads working? Can you see how this is going to help you tone those hips and thighs the way you said you want?
Those sales tactics, man, are still strong.
So the creation of machines was just as much about path of least resistance to selling the gym membership or the dream of being fit, if you will, and not fat anymore or more healthy or whatever it was, as it was for making it easier for somebody to maybe adopt an exercise program. Now, I ask the questions and I bring the experiences up because I see people walking into gyms, and I just explained my experience back in the day, and it's even still now where in back in the day, people would walk in, men and women alike, by the way, and they'd look around at 40,000, 50,000 square foot facility and we'd go, holy shit, where do I start with this? How do I make sense of where to go and what's best for me at what time based on my current starting position, my current, or my workout history, my health history. I have this little knee thing. Does that knee extension machine even that great for me? I don't know. One of the things we used to do was we would give, like a 1 hour session to every new member that would come in. And the idea there's, a lot of times they start with the chart. You got to walk through each piece of equipment. You got to show them proper use of equipment. You got to show them how to, where the locker rooms are, where the spa is, all that kind of stuff, and then send them on their way. Now you have your workout card, right? And people would stick that workout card like, oh, I just do all these machines and I'm going to get fit. The point is people walk in with some idea in their head. And a lot of times now they're walking into gyms and there's so much different equipment on top of what we just said. They're having a tough time picking what's appropriate for them, maybe sometimes wasting their time. Maybe they're setting themselves up for maybe some injury. I don't want to make it an injury, thing. I just want to make it like, what's the most benefit? Where are you going to get the most bang for your buck based on where you're going? So I thought it'd be interesting if we sat down and we spent a few minutes only on a list of equipment and how that might benefit certain populations and certain applications based on where you're coming in.
Love it.
So we can kind of dig into it a little bit and talk about the individuals. And hopefully this makes sense for people that are maybe just getting started or have been out of the game a while and are looking for some bits of information to kind of get themselves back into it, or they've been wandering around the gym for a while now and they're running out of things to do, or they're getting bored, or they're recognizing the machines just aren't doing it for them. Or lastly, if you are like, if you are that person that works out a lot and you get this, like you're as fired up about it as I was when I walked into the gym at 15, and you're trying to get your family members, or you're trying to get your cousin or your sister, or your buddy or whoever to get working out, and they're intimidated. They don't necessarily want to go to the gym by themselves, but they're also not ready to invest maybe in a coach or go to a class or something like that. How do you explain where they might start or how they might not train them, but tell them or expose them to, hey, here's what you might think about when you get into stuff. All right.
Okay.
So what I want to start with is dumbbells. Like, where do dumbbells fit into the mix? And who can benefit by those? When should you think about using them? When might it not be, when might you start thinking about not using dumbbells? And I'll start with you, Jeff.
All right. So dumbbells, I love dumbbells. One, for the instability factor. You have to stabilize dumbbells. And when I say that, you have to stabilize on each side, right? We're independent. And the reason why I like them is a lot of people have a discrepancy through their shoulders, right? Whether that's be the thoracic spine, lateral bending one way, scoliosis, whatever. When you're pushing through a dumbbell, you do not need to really have your shoulders even, right? They can be doing their own thing. When you get into a barbell, right? Well, as we'll talk about later, you're going to have an asymmetrical shift, and really one of those shoulders, whichever one's compensating, is going to have a hard time. It's going to have a really bad shear force through it. Whereas the dumbbells can have a little more play. One can be lower, one can be higher. I can kind of be cocked to the side.
It's a little bit more forgiving.
It's a lot more forgiving. And one, I'm using those more in a hypertrophy phase.
So if you're looking to
build muscle, like if we're talking about bodybuilding, I know like the hypertrophy for some people is like, what is that? Hypertrophy is usually at 8 to 12 rep range with a 60-second, about a minute rest, right?
Okay, fair enough. Yep.
And that's where most bodybuilders or people that are trying to build muscle are at, right? And so when we start looking at what's going on with the dumbbell, I can kind of start going through more of a mid motion, more than a full range in hypertrophy, saving the joints, whatever. It's more beneficial for joint health if you're having an athlete that can't activate through full range. You can get them stringing through mid range. There's a whole bunch of ways that you can apply the dumbbell versus dumbbell, right? Contralateral load.
Single side versus, So you can be using in the dumbbell press or bench press example, I can be doing one arm over the other arm, and there's lots of applications for that.
For sure,
it's a little bit more forgiving. It's interesting. We're talking about free weights, and free weights generally have this connotation of, well, there's more danger associated with free weights because of the freedom of movement that you have and the need, or you needing to be able to stabilize and keep those things, under control. I think there's a lot of unnecessary, I guess, worry that people have brought up about free weights. So certainly you got to be careful
because a lot of the talk is 90 degree.
Yeah. It's all very hard, right?
Yeah,
like it's all, there's hard stops and starts and don't do this, but do this. And if you don't do it like that, you're wasting your time. But yeah, I think dumbbells can come into play there for somebody that's getting started. They're a very appropriate place to start. Cece, something you wanted to add there?
Oh yeah, no, I love dumbbells because of the versatility that they afford an individual. Jeff alluded to, or not alluded to, he said, that whole stabilizing factor with regard to joint stability when moving those dumbbells. But the other thing is too, if you're just starting and you walk into a gym, not very many commercial gyms that I'm aware of have barbells that are a 10 kilo, which is maybe 22 pounds or a 12 pound bar, even for that matter. So they usually have the standard 20 kilo bar,
45 pound bar.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So that can be very intimidating for anybody that's just starting. If you're going to do, let's say, a bench press and you have to push 45 pounds off your chest, and you've never done it before, you have zero body awareness. Whereas dumbbells are way easier to get into position and move through space. So there's that, the upper body component. You can still do explosive exercises for the more advanced individual with dumbbells. You can still do lower body exercises with dumbbells, RDLs, for example, split stance, B stance RDLs. However, that can be a little limiting once you start to get into, heavier dumbbells where your grip starts to fail before the rest of you starts to fail. So, but I mean, there's so much versatility with dumbbells. I think they're great for anybody at any stage. Yeah, great. Depending on what the goal is.
Right. Great point. I mean, you mentioned something there about versatility. There's nothing you can do with a barbell that you can't do with the dumbbell, right? And you mentioned going into the gym and having like very limited availability to a variation of barbells, right? The other thing I like, and the last thing I'll kind of put on this is if you're just starting out, particularly, and you're unsure of what load you should be working at, and how much weight do I need to be using here or there. Typically with dumbbells, they go up in very small increments, right? Yeah. Like here at the gym, we have up to about 35 pounds. We actually go in 2.5 pound increments because for a beginner, the difference between 12.5 pound dumbbell and a 15 pound dumbbell, believe it or not, depending on what movement or what exercise that we're asking them to do, can be a large jump. For some people, like, what are you talking about? Like, if I'm not jumping up 10 pounds of dumbbell, like I'm wasting my time. I get that. I get that mentality. Yeah. But then I could challenge you in a few different ways. I think, yeah, I've been there too. But it gives you a little bit more flexibility in your ability to explore and progress and choose maybe even if they're lower than what I would say maybe most beneficial load, like, or you're not getting quite as much out of it. You're getting you have the ability to kind of get there on your own specific time. Right, without worrying about maybe the risk,
the safety factor and all that stuff like that. Yeah, because even with a lighter load, I mean, if you slow the movement pattern down, right? I mean, you still can get benefit there as far as like the time under load, or the old phrase was time under tension, right? So
interesting.
So let's move on to bands and talk about where because bands kind of made their way into the scene. I mean, they've been around a long time. Tubing has been around forever, but we started to see the use of like these super bands or the thicker bands. I mean, they go everything from like a 1/4 inch up to like 3 inches, depending on what resistance profile you're looking for. So I think everybody can benefit by band or from bands, but not every gym or every facility or every garage gym out there has accessibility to them. Here's the thing that I like about bands before I turn it over to you guys. Very inexpensive, very easy to get your hands on. It's a quick, trip down to your local equipment shop, like your homegrown or small business. That's the first place you should be going because it's America. Second place I guess you could go is that other place, starts with an A, ends with an N, on the internet, where you could order some of those pretty quick and get them to your house. But I like them because they're inexpensive and they can be very effective. Last part, where I say they're fairly non-intimidating once you know how to use them, right? And I think that's where the question now becomes is like, where are they most appropriately used, CC? Like, where do you fit those into the workout for sort of the newbie? And if you're that person that really understands bands, how do you explain it to the newbie to where they can kind of get it and benefit by them?
Oh, for the newbie, like you said, that there's various thicknesses and resistance profiles. So for a newbie, they can start with a thinner band or a less resistance profile and use it for a warm up, or stand on it and put it around the shoulders and try doing some squatting or doing some rows because it's so versatile. Attaching it at some fixed point, whether it's on the floor, close to the floor, or shoulder height. Practice pulling because they'll still get the resistance factor through a range of motion for whatever body part they're using. As far as for myself, I've used the super bands for a warm up. Warming up my muscles and my joints before going to pick up a barbell or a dumbbell or something like that. As far as the thicker bands, the thing that we do here the most with them is pull-ups.
Exactly.
To give somebody some assistance so you can either stand in it or you can kneel in it. That's going to change the resistance profile of whichever band that you choose by just, changing of the body lever with the pull. And you're able to get somebody in an actual pull-up position. Because when you do a pull-up, you have to engage, your glutes and your abs and, your upper body instead of just kneeling on an assisted machine, right? That's going to be supporting your body weight to help you pull up. So I know some of our team members here, they use it a variety of different ways as far as, Jeff, I'm sure will elaborate on this, but, with deadlifting and RDLing and those types of things and bench pressing, I've seen him use it with some of our other clients as far as that may have challenges with movement patterns because of injuries or, whatever might be going on with them. So they're just really versatile. And you can't really get hurt with them.
Unless one snaps.
Exactly.
And that happens. So that is one thing you need to be, and you should advise anybody, but particularly a newbie to it, is whenever they're using a band, is to make sure they've got one that's got good integrity. Exactly. 2 things I want to add before I hand it over to Jeff here. First off, I want to go back to the pull-up thing. And I also want to talk about the term you use, resistance profile. And I'm going to go backwards and frontwards. So resistance profile, for those of you listening or trying to explain it to somebody, think about this. You have a rubber band in your hand and you pull it apart, right? You start at the beginning and that resistance is low, right? But as it begins to stretch, the resistance gets higher. So effectively, if I'm starting in my start position, and the example I would use would be like, say, a chest press. So I have the tubing or the band anchored to the wall behind me, and I've got my hands and handles. I'm facing away from my anchor, and I've got those things in my hand. I'm pressing through my arms, like as in a chest press or a bench press, out in front of me. At the beginning of that movement, there's very little resistance. That's when I'm at, and at the beginning of the movement, I would be in my bottom position. So my elbows are and arms would be like, say, 90 degrees off my shoulders. But as I start to extend, that resistance profile increases. That is, I feel more resistance because now the band is going on stretch as I'm moving into my strongest position, my more stable position. So it can be a really great place to start to warm up, as you mentioned, or build strength at the end ranges, right? But also learn how to take on load at the weaker ranges of motion. So that's the first thing with resistance profile, and that moves into the pull-up piece, right? And the pull-up being, you won't see anybody feel more empowered in the gym than when they can do a pull-up. Like when they get up there on that bar, they do a pull-up for the very first time. It's like, it's high-fiving. They're telling everybody, I did a pull-up today. And it is not the same as sitting down on a machine and doing a pull down. It is a completely different muscle recruitment pattern, on top of you are doing you're pulling your body through space to a fixed point versus pulling a bar to this is attached to a cable to your body. There's 2 different things there. I don't have to dig into that. But my point being is, like, when you have this rubber band on there, it helps you get there. And if you understand that resistance profile, you would get, like, the thicker the band, the more help I'm going to get. So Jeff, maybe just turning that over real quick to you with regard to the to the resistance profiles where you might implement these bands in the program for somebody.
So for the bands, like for me, when I'm looking at bands and adding to strength profile, like where am I weakest in my lift? And I'm going to add the band to that. So you're talking about deadlifts. When we start driving through leg drive from the floor and we start getting into really hip extension, as the band extends through my top lockout where I'm going to be the weakest, I can literally have a lower load. I can have bands on the side to where I lift off the ground. It's light. And when I get to my lockout, it gets to a full extension of contraction from the bands, right? So I'm adding 80 pounds of tension through my lockout. But as I get down through the extension through my lower portion, where I would have a lot of breakdown, right?
Begins to unload it a bit.
Exactly, right? And I'm really going through that extension period where I'm eccentrically loading, right? Creating a lot of damage. I can kind of bypass that and work through the concentric with the bands, right? So that's one way that I put them. And you have to look at the strength profile of an exercise and understand where this is going to be. And you can also reverse it as well. So for instance, if I'm doing squats, I can stand up with the band wrapped around the bottom of the rack to the bar and come up through concentric.
So it's pulling you up, right?
Or I can rack the band to the top around. So as I get in my concentric, it's literally pulling the bar off of me. And as I stand up, the weight's lighter. So I could use more weight coming in through the eccentric, getting a little bit of help at the bottom
coming
and
out.
Standing up through more of a grinding set. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, I think so. When we see people, so if you're a new person, you walk in, you see people doing what looks to be a very fancy exercise. By the way, none of them are fancy. They're all the same exercises. People are just adding a little bit of mustard to them, right? And the bands are one of those things. And it is a little bit more complex, but if you use them in their simplest form and you understand them at the base level, you can maybe start to put together the pieces of how to implement these into your program. All right, let's circle it back. I want to come back to barbells because, again, that's a super traditional piece of equipment and everybody can benefit by using a barbell at some level. It's just like when and how. So to make a very strong point, not every barbell weighs 45 pounds, nor does it need to. At Red Dot, we've got...
It's like 43.
We have a ton of barbells here. They're all different weights, sizes, lengths, depending on the application we're going to use it for and the client that we're going to use, that's going to be using it. There's all different kinds of things. A lot of gyms don't have that kind of variety, right? Go back to buying all those different pieces of equipment. They buy this huge set of stuff and it comes with 10 of these and 5 of those and whatever else. And then somewhere along the line, they'll get this conglomeration of stuff, maybe a few things, but not all barbells are created equal. Again, weight,
not all plates.
Weight, yeah, and that's true too. Not all weights. I mean, if you take a 45-pound plate, in some cases, put it on the scale, and take another 45-pound plate that has the same stamp and same imprint on it, you're going to find some wild difference. Like this shit's 1.5 pounds lighter. It's literally that
you're
kind of
paying for calibrated plates.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
they're calibrated, you're paying for that.
Yeah, a lot of people ask, why do we have the funny name plates in here? Because I'm not dealing with what you just mentioned.
Exactly.
They are calibrated plates.
Calibrated.
I digress. So going back to the barbell. So Jeff had made a point earlier about the barbells being fixed. So your hands are fixed doing a bench press. And if you've got some discrepancy in strength or stability or mechanics within your pressing motion, the barbell could be problematic. It doesn't mean it is going to be problematic. It just means it can be problematic. So it's also one of those things where you might so from a mechanical perspective and actual lifting perspective, something to think about before you start grabbing barbells and doing these more traditional type movements. Again, nothing you can do with the barbell that you can't do with dumbbells. Yep. Something to think about there. The other thing is a lot of people don't have these in their garage or in their home gym or in their little apartment gym or whatever for a couple different reasons. One, because they're expensive, right? Two, because they're coveted and they'll walk right out the fucking door if you leave them unattended, right? So they don't have them. They may have had one in there at one point. Three, they only have one. Right. And everybody's trying to use it. Right. Yep. So that's another thing. Or you just don't have space. So like if you're in a little home gym and you're in like one of these, I mean, like these apartments around us are like little boxes, right? Like if you're trying to set up some type of an inside home gym, you don't have a garage, put it in or whatever, you don't even have room to get a full barbell on a rack with plates on it. So I think that's one of the things that people are a little unfamiliar with using them if they've had a home gym and they walk into a gym. It's like, where do I start with this? I've got it's bench presses and incline presses, and there's a squat rack over there. And how do I do all this? When's a good time, CC, to implement the barbell into your programming, and how do you do it?
That's a good question. It's all about where an individual is in front of you as far as where they are in their fitness journey, what their experience has been like, and how well do they move, and what's their orthopedic history. So, again, there have been some individuals that I've had that are brand new to resistance training, and I will put a barbell in their hand, but we might not be back squatting and we might not be deadlifting, but you know what? We can push up on it like a push up for an inverted push up. We can pull on it like an inverted row.
So it's set up. So it's set up at, say, like chest to waist height on a
squat rack,
on the J cups within the squat rack. So you're doing a push up on that bar, or you're doing a pull. For lack of a better term, it looks like a pull up, but it's more of a row.
Bodyweight row, yeah.
Right, on there. So you feel what the bar feels like in your hands. Gotcha.
So, there's that for a new person. And I think that helps because it takes away the intimidation factor of walking up to that barbell or walking up to that rack.
So important.
Right?
Yeah.
The barbell is one of my favorite pieces of equipment. I remember you asked me years ago, if you had to choose, a type of equipment, what would you choose and why? And I think I said a barbell and a rack, just because of its versatility as well. However, you have to be able to pick up the bar if you're going to put it on the rack. And you're going to have to be able to support yourself, as well as the bar if you're going to squat with it or deadlift with it or anything like that. So, or press with it. But again, the versatility of the bars of having different loads. You could have somebody with not much experience in the gym setting, but that might be athletic, and give them a 10-pound bar, or a 15-kilo bar, and have them go through basic movement patterns after you've assessed whether or not they have quality movement patterns.
Absolutely.
So if you're a new person, I think the most important thing is just getting the bar in their hands somehow, right? So like if you're walking to a gym the first time and you've never really used one before and you're not really sure, if you have enough strength to maybe push your own body weight up, 10 or 15 times, and maybe you can get under a 45-pound bar and push that bar up. Give it
YouTube is a great place to find out where your hands need to be on a barbell. By the way, go to like Red Dot YouTube channel. By the way, shameless plug, dude. Like, hey, by the way,
we take care of people there. You're right, and I think you mentioned it before. Is getting somebody comfortable with kind of being around the rack and being on the bar and how to set it up, and also owning that real estate once they're there. And understanding, I think the last thing about that, because we got into the racks and the barbell thing, is maybe a little etiquette for somebody somebody that doesn't know or hasn't been in before.
Curls.
Like, you never bicep curl
you never straight bar curl because if you can't deadlift off the floor what you're curling, there's a serious issue.
There's a whole lot of reasons why you shouldn't be doing that. But all joking aside, like, hey, get in there, get out of there, do your pull-ups or do your push-ups, right? Or your rows or your push-ups. Get in there, get out of there, figure out what it's like to kind of have to adjust the rack a little bit, get that bar on and off the rack, put it back where it belongs, whatever, load weights on. The squat rack and the barbell are a great place to do that. It's very safe. Again, it gives you sort of some familiarity with that side of the gym if you've never been in it before, which, again, I think just can warm you up to a lot of the other things that we'll even talk about here in a sec.
Yeah. Well, the other thing with the barbell too is, for you to advance, you have to have the progressive overload, right? And so, there's a certain point where dumbbells will only get you so far. Let's say you're doing a dumbbell bench press. You're only going to be able to get a certain load of dumbbells up by yourself if you don't have a spotter. Whereas with the barbell, you can load that thing up and you.
Exactly. So the example would be like grabbing two 50-pound dumbbells.
And CC does this all the time. Have to have the
ropes. Check the gram. It's all over the gram. If you grab two 50-pound dumbbells and you have to pull those off the rack, then you have to get them up onto your legs and you have to get down onto the bench, press those, and then get up off that bench and then re-rack those. It's much different than putting 100 pounds on the bar, right? Because you got a 45-pound bar with, less the 100. So the point of that being like, yes, at some point you'll want to graduate if the goal is hypertrophy and strength and, building strength over time progressively. And you make a good point there. All right, let's talk about cables and getting those into the workout program. And let's talk specifically to the beginner. we just talked about tubing in the past, a few minutes ago, and a lot of the similar to same application. The difference being, if you're a newbie thinking about this and you listen to what we said there about resistance profiles and bands and how it changes as the band gets stretched versus the band, at the beginning of the regular length of the band to the stretch length of the band. This is where the major difference starts to come in with cables, because if you're connected to a cable stack, that resistance profile stays relatively the same the whole time, right? If you have effectively, if you have 40 pounds on the stack, talk about that, 40 pounds on the stack, you're still at the beginning, it's going to feel like 40 pounds at the stack at the beginning of the movement and at the end of the movement. That's just the way it is. But cables are awesome because they allow a few different things to be done outside of what you'd be able to do with, say, a fixed piece of equipment, or like even a free bar or a set of dumbbells. I love cables because they open up a lot of variability for things like pushing and pressing and curling and extending and things like that. But I love because they're very helpful for the rotational component, which I think is so often missed. No, I know it's so often missed in 98% of the programming and the workouts that I just see people doing on a daily basis. So when I say rotation, I just mean things. I think this is a common term that people can think about, which is the wood chop type of high to low rotation through the trunk, through the hips,
the golf swing, the slap shot, the baseball.
There you go. Exactly.
Boom.
And those are, when people are going in and they want to train their quote unquote layman's terms core and all the things that it involves. If you're not rotating, then you're not training properly. If you're training your quote unquote core. So I love cables for that and some of those applications, but maybe turn it over to you, Jeff, just from a cable perspective. What are some of the applications? What are the things you think like a newbie could be doing, and how would you explain to them how to do it well to get familiar with the cables, to not be afraid to go over there and give it a try and explore a little bit?
So what I like about the cables is you can line them up with the muscle fiber that you're working for yourself and for your own anatomy. Whether you're on a bench doing an incline fly, you want to stand and do a press, you want to do a decline fly, high to low, whatever it is, there's ways to sit there and set that cable up for that resistance
Fully
profile.
adjustable. Fully adjustable.
Exactly. And if you can get the bench in there, you don't have to stand the whole time. You can get the bench in there, sit. There's a whole bunch of ways that you can use the bands. But as long as they're aligned with the muscle...
Cables.
Cables. As long as they're aligned with the muscle fiber and the action that we're doing, and we're properly loading these cables, that's completely fine. Where I see cables getting misused is going way to failure before you go into your presses with like some flies where you're supposed to be activating, right? Or like pre-fatigue.
So what you're doing is you're talking about somebody doing a ton of fly movements using the cable. So before like that butterfly movement before they go and on a strength training day and going and getting underneath the heavy barbell or heavy dumbbells. Yeah. And
there's application for that if we're looking at hypertrophy or bodybuilding, and it's a different conversation, but I think that there's a misapplication when used with, like we're talking about cables, bands, things like that in either previous or like post fatigue strength training, where they're like, I just did my chest and now I'm going to do 4 sets of flies to fatigue.
Right. So maybe the takeaway here is like, if you're new to this, like the time to start this, and maybe CCU agree or disagree, is like right there at the beginning of your training session. Like if you're unfamiliar with them, like go over there, let's play a little bit, like while you're fresh, but pre-fatigued, to maybe use it as a warm up, much like you would be the bands in the way that we described before, or just kind of, again, you're fresh, you're not worried about time yet. You're over there, you're able to explore.
I honestly see the cables as more as a bodybuilding facilitation. Yeah. Like if we're going to look at functional strength, and I hate to say that word functional because a lot of the functional strength does not translate to real world application. It just doesn't. No one's standing in neutral position and doing all the grabbing their package off the floor. It's not happening. But just with that application, I see it being used wrong. Yeah. Right.
So again, we talked about, fiber alignment, things like that. If you really want to nerd out on that, then listen to the podcast that we've done with Caleb and Jeff with regard to specifically how to build bigger, better arms. And there's a few other ones in there.
On it as well.
Go to the Red Dot Fitness YouTube channel. You're going to see a bunch of that stuff. Cece, cables.
I do like cables. I think that they're pretty forgiving because, you know, you have the load adjustment can be, let's say 10 pounds to, you know, 170, 80 pounds. Not all cable machines are created equal though. So depending on the thickness of the cable, that's going to change, you know, the resistance that you're getting. But, you know, for the most part, I think it's pretty forgiving, especially for a new person. I think there are some things that you need to be aware of. You know, Jeff talked about fiber alignment, but I'm thinking about like joint axis alignment as far as what joint is moving and then where the cable is lined up to utilize this piece of equipment. But, you know, kind of like selectorized equipment anymore, when you go to a gym for a cable machine, it's going to have the pretty little pictures with the anatomy and then, you know, suggestions of exercises to do with it. So like you mentioned, if you're new, you can, and you want to play with it and you've never really played with it, you can go over there and kind of take a look or maybe ask your, you know, professional that's there to take you through some exercises. I think that, you know, there's definitely limitations, but, you know, for isolating certain body parts or for doing rotations, which is often neglected, I think it's a great, great modality.
Yeah. So again, if you want to see, if you're a little bit more advanced, or even if you just want to nerd out a little bit and hear more about that joint alignment, fiber alignment stuff for, you know, building certain areas of your body, and where the cable applications are our favorite exercises and the ones we like to use the most with both our, just in our own programs with our clients, go to the Red Dot Fitness YouTube channel, check out the, both the demonstration videos as well as the instructional videos by Caleb and the podcasts as well.
They're really good. Not biased, but I mean, they're really good.
Let's move on to what I see a lot, which is the kettlebell, right? The kettlebell showed up into the gyms quite some time ago. There is a lot of utility in the kettlebell that I really like. They're one of my favorites, and mostly because of the word I just used, which is the utility. They're very mobile. They're very versatile. I can push, pull, press, rotate. I need very little space to do that in. It takes very little real estate in my gym. It takes very little real estate in my living room or in my garage or in the trunk of my car. And I can do all the things I can do with dumbbells effectively with kettlebells with some nuance. But the kettlebells are the ones that I see being used, but I probably see them being used inappropriately most of the time. So here's my take on kettlebells. First off, I do see it as a little bit more in going back to the term you use, the functional sense, more of a dynamic piece of equipment. Like, certainly you can use it to push and pull, right? Like a row or a press, something like that. And they offer a certain amount of variability there. But the kettlebell in and of itself was made to be something that was very versatile in terms of building strength, power. Endurance, and stamina the Russian army picked this up very, 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 very quickly. I mean, it was a cheap piece of equipment to use, and it can get you in incredible shape with very little space or time, especially if you're impacted by not having enough resources. The things I see people doing with kettlebells the most are going to be the traditional thing that kettlebells are most known for, which is the swing. And hopefully at this point, anybody that listens to our podcast understands, like, we are very much about making sure like people get to do all the things that they want to do and all the things they should be doing in order to achieve the best level of strength, health, whatever. But if you're a newbie, the swing probably isn't the one you want to go out and master first. Like, that's just not one. Like, yeah, you're going to feel your glutes. Like, yeah, you're going to feel your hamstrings, but there's so many other things you should be focused on before getting into a dynamic or ballistic movement like the kettlebell swing, which is what a kettlebell swing is supposed to be. It is explosive. So I'm just going to leave it there and then turn it over to you guys. Like, with regard to kettlebell usage, so many things you can do, but going back to the word I used, which is nuance, when you start getting into kettlebells from, say, dumbbells, you have, again, you're trying to isolate areas or joint complexes or things like that. When you start using a kettlebell, there's a certain level of skill that you're going to need to have, and awareness that you're going to need to have beyond the dumbbell, that
the load's different.
It's just different. There's a lot of different things without boring people about that or even confusing them. There's a lot of different things. So you just want to be careful about that. CC kettlebells.
Kettlebells. Yeah. So, Jeff just said the load's different, but I think, the thing that comes to me is the fact that, you can move your body around the kettlebell, versus a dumbbell. There can be a lot more fluidity with it. You talked about building strength and stamina, but I mean, there's the cardiovascular component that you can get with the kettlebell as well, depending on the application that you're using it. So, the center of mass for a kettlebell is completely different than a center of mass for a barbell. So to get people to, learn to deadlift or pick something up off the ground, the center of mass is so much closer to their center of gravity. It's easier for them to feel and to move through a movement pattern. You can also make it as complex as you want to, working on shoulder joint stability. Let's say using the kettlebell for a bottoms up overhead press, whether you're kneeling or you're standing or you're doing a bench press. It's a fun modality. It's more, I would say, non-traditional, quote, air quotes, whatever.
Unconventional.
Yeah. Unconventional. Yeah. And so, if you're a newbie and you walk in and you see those, they can be intimidating, but yet if you have somebody, that can mentor you through the process or teach you through the process, it can be really fun and it can change up your whole workout. But yet you can also still progress at the same time. So,
Jeff, I want to move to a different piece of unconventional equipment, and that being the Bulgarian bags. They've started to show themselves into the gyms. I mean, we certainly have a bunch of them here. We've been blessed to know the creator of the Bulgarian Bag and some of his most expert coaches that have come in and worked with us here at the facility. And this is definitely a more obscure piece of equipment. So for those people that don't know what a Bulgarian Bag is or looks like, and it's basically, think of like a kidney bean, a large kidney bean.
Looks like a croissant.
Yeah, like a croissant. So it's made out of cowhide, right? And so it's filled. It's got a stuffing, much like a punching bag or whatnot, and it's weighted. And then on the end of each end of that kidney bean, you're going to have handles or grips, which are basically, for lack of a better term, they look like the teats on a udder of a cow, right? And then there are. I did say teats. Wait, you guys didn't take zoology in your.
Absolutely, dude. I know what teats are, bro.
Look at how embarrassed you two are.
Dude, it's funny that I'm embarrassed on titties, right? Like, dude, I say titties all the time.
Can we be professional?
I'm sorry, dude. My bad. Let me reel it. Can we reel it in?
My God.
All right.
So bring it back. So you've got these handles on the end. Plus you've got
some like udders. Okay, they're milking it. Yeah, we got it. Okay, let's go.
And then on the top you got a couple more handles.
Cool.
And the point to this is it gets a completely different modality. It's an outside external source of load that can be used a lot similarly to the kettlebell. And tons of application, but also very intimidating if you've never used it before, because like kettlebells, it does take a certain level of skill. Also takes a tremendous amount of strength. Within your arms and your hands and your wrists. I mean, if you want a forearm pump, hey, all those moto guys out there, all those jujitsu guys out there, when I say moto, I mean like motorbikes that ride like dirt track and shit.
If you're a jujitsu guy and you're not on the Bulgarian Bag,
you're missing out, man.
Yeah.
They're incredible. In fact, they have a gi.
Yeah, dude.
They make a gi that fits around the Bulgarian Bag so that you can practice your grip with the gi. Get on the Bulgarian Bag. But
by the way, a wrestler created this. And when I say a wrestler, he's a world-class coach that has literally created multiple world-class athletes off of this application.
Yeah. So talk about like where this fits in, or where a newbie might use this. And when I say newbie, I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean somebody that's exploring, maybe moving on to some of these more unconventional types of exercise modalities. Where could you fit it in?
So it's a very easy entry point into, let's say, a higher skill level movement without that much
risk.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
That is fair.
Okay.
And when I say risk, there is risk in the Bulgarian Bag. Obviously, as we're going over our head having to focus on our shoulders with a lot of the movements with the bag. Now the bag is designed off counterbalance, which a lot of the wrestlers, jiu-jitsu guys, if I say counterbalance, they're going to understand that. And so using that tool, and it's all about rotation. Every movement in that thing has a rotational component in it and grip strength, right? So if you're an athlete that needs to focus on grip strength while going through a long-term rotational movement, focusing on endurance, which you guys are on the floor, you guys are wrestling for longer periods of time, right? You need to have long grip strength. You need to be able to grip somebody and shrimp them. Like there's things that you need to do, right? And this tool, one, is perfect for those athletes, and one, it's great for the person that doesn't know how to rotate, because they come in variable size bags, right? You have a 48 kilo bag, all these different size bags that come down, right? And so you can start somebody with 8 kilo bag, 4 kilo bag, to focus on the movement quality. And then over time you can increase that weight. Exactly. But what I love about it is the movement quality within rotation of even basic people to athletes.
Yeah, I agree with you. What you see when people start to pick up the bag the first times, first off, their eyes get real big, real fast at the conditioning piece. When I say that conditioning, like what is happening cardiovascularly and anaerobically uber quick. And then secondly, the grip part of it. So we brought this one into this discussion because for me, I passed by Kyotera Jiu-Jitsu studio, which is literally right across the street from where we live. I pass by it every night and it's awesome. I mean, it's world-class guys in there from the world team, and as also coaches. The point of this is it's packed in there and tons of white belts and tons of blue belts. In my experience, particularly like in the, let's just say in the tactical or firearm space and doing some grappling with guys and doing some self-defense stuff and offensive stuff, is what I find is a lot of people in that world. And again, I'm bringing this up for the newbies because you're a newbie. You're a white belt, right? You're a blue belt. You're still a newbie.
You don't want to do black belt shit.
Your black belts will tell you, I'm still new at this. I'm just now starting to discover. My point is they go into this using jiu-jitsu only as their mode of fitness, right? So if you picked like a single mode of fitness to really be as your focus for whatever the reason might be, again, it's jiu-jitsu, martial arts, or even cycling or running or whatever else, and you need to implement some kind of resistance training into your program, the Bulgarian bag is an awesome way to do that. Again, particularly when we're talking about the grappling sports, it's a great way to build strength, endurance, and as well as strength, stamina, and build it through multiple ranges of motion, including that rotational component, which shows up in every second that you're on the mat. Especially
if you golf, if you play hockey, if you're baseball, whatever it is, this tool is going to get you better regardless.
Yeah. So if you're brand new to the gym and fitness, my recommendation is stay away from it. It's just not important for you right now.
High skill acquisition.
Yeah. You will not get the benefits of the bag provided. There's many pieces of other equipment and things that you should probably be doing in order to build that stuff up.
Great point.
So let's circle it back to the stationary equipment, or what's been referred to or sort of termed selectorized equipment. This is the equipment that's fixed to the floor. Just about everybody's familiar with this. Doesn't matter where you go, what gym you walk into, there's at least one or two pieces of this where there's a cable and a weight stack. This is different than the cable machines, like the cable crossover, which we were
talking about maybe more plate loaded, or like overhead press stacked.
There's combinations of stuff. So you got chest press, knee extensions, leg extensions, leg curl, right?
They're focusing on a singular muscle
and or joint complex. So you got your row machines and things like that. So this is a place where I think people gravitate to very quickly because obviously it's available to them. They're fairly familiar. It's generally very non-intimidating if you're not intimidated to go on the floor, you're probably not intimidated to, play around with that seated row machine or that delt machine or whatever the case is. What I want to talk about less is about all the different types of equipment that are out there, and a couple of key concepts that people want to be aware of when they're using these machines, or when they're helping their friends potentially use these machines. And so I'll kick it off and hand it over to you guys. The first thing is not all this equipment is not created for everybody.
No,
it's 100% not created for everybody. When I started in this business, it was awful. Like if you were basically, if you were less than like 5'3" or 4, don't even try. There just were not enough adjustments on there to go back to joint alignment, fiber alignment and things. to get you set up on that thing to get the benefits of that machine. In fact, it could be setting you up for not so great stuff. Yep. So that it still exists to some point or at some point today, but it has gotten a lot better. But not all machines are created for everybody. So be aware of that. The second thing is not all machines are created equal. Some manufacturers have done a really good job of working with people that are in the field. They're not just engineers, right, that are looking to build a CAD program that then they can dump into a CNC machine or in a machine shop and mass produce this stuff. These are people that have actually studied biomechanics, studied human anatomy.
Hammer strength.
Yeah, hammer strength, life fitness. I think there's a few out there, to talk about. Cybex was one of those ones that put a lot of time and effort into. I think they do a great job. Sornex is another one. The point of this is not all of them are created equal in terms of the benefits that you can get from them based on what they're saying you're going to get from it. So think about that for a second. Now, the last thing I want to say is not every machine needs to be used for the use that the instruction card says it needs to be used for. There are different things. So you're going to see people in what might look really weird to you. You might see them using a push machine as a pull or a pull machine as a push in different ways. Don't be intimidated by that. There are applications for this. But at the same time, don't get caught up on, how can I do some circus trick on this machine over here?
This machine.
Yeah, I see that happening a lot too. Like, can we make this any more complicated? Just go get a dumbbell, dude. Or whatever.
Or another 25 pound on each side.
Or something. But with the selectorized machines, so many of them to choose from in the gym. Jeff, where do you start with using machines?
So for me, when I'm looking at machines when I first started getting into the gym, a lot of push and back, for legs, like a lot of people for a long time, I neglected them. And when I say neglected, I hit them maybe one time a week, but getting into legs, what I noticed is I would get into a squat. I would fatigue myself on a squat and I still want to do my leg. Like my legs are a big muscle group, right? As everybody's. So I want to go in and I hit machines. So leg press. So what I found is recently I've not had access to a leg press. So I've been doing other things to try to compensate for it, barbell hack squat, other things like that. It does not equate.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. It doesn't equate. I notice a less lackluster on my quads, which I'm not trying to get on stage. So this is an aesthetic thing, but if I'm putting my time in to build muscle and I see that one exercise is less effective than the other in building a certain muscle group, I'm going to cut it and never do it again. And I'm going to do the one that gives me the biggest bang for my buck, maybe 7 sets of it. Right. The sets is arbitrary. It's more about what I'm activating and like, what am I trying to get out of it? What am I trying to get out of this exercise? Because if you're on a machine, it's less stabilization and more muscular breakdown, right? Like we're able to stabilize on these machines.
Yeah. What you're saying is you can overload. Yes.
So with that in mind, when you're on these machines, you're stabilizing everything nice and tight, and you're going through a full range of motion on these machines because you are allowed that extra stability to produce that extra force to gain and build muscle. Good point. So if you're on these machines, be attentive about it. And also from that, like you're learning a motor pattern, you're able to go to dumbbells, barbells, etc.
Yeah. So a couple takeaways there are they can in effect be safer, right? When you're overloading the body. But the takeaway I'm getting, and you didn't say this directly, but I'm going to, and that is, don't think that you have to go through the machines to get a good result. I'm
so glad you said that.
Yeah, you don't have to do these things. They're there. They're kind of like additives. And I've heard you even refer to them as these are the things that I use on my recovery days.
Exactly. Yeah, supplemental days.
This shouldn't be the bulk of the work that you're doing.
They shouldn't, because they take away from it. And when I look at, like you're talking about, at the gym, we don't have any machines here, right?
You're not going to find a lot of machines at Red Dot Fitness.
So when you come here and I'm going to look at joint instability, well, I'm going to stabilize that joint before I hit you on the barbell. Right. That's what we're doing here. And however you want to do that as a practitioner, because there's multiple different ways to do it. I don't care how you do it, but you solidify that joint, you teach them how to pack it, how to load it, and then you add them to the barbell with no weight. And then
because everything we do is coached here. We don't find a huge use for it taking up real estate. to do what you just said, which is help people to understand how to create that stability around there. Cece, machines.
Machines. I was listening to your conversation and I was thinking about the application of machines. And, I think it's a great place for somebody who's new to strength training because of the safe factor. They can really isolate and think about what it is that they're doing if they're doing it with intent. And chances are where those machines are is in a big box gym or in a larger gym. And, you're going to have your owners or your coaches. Chances are you're going to have somebody readily available to you to have an introduction to the machine
and quickly
to show about, setup and all of that. So I do think it's great for beginners, but I also see it as a great tool for individuals who are more advanced who want to isolate a certain joint and body part
Absolutely,
for, hypertrophy Physique. Or whatever. Yeah. Exactly. But the other thing is, I really like it in the fact that, I've used machines in the past really with athletes for rehab because of the stability factor and the isolating factor. And, you can do unilateral things and they really just have to focus on keeping tension in their body and working that single body part with the machine versus having to really worry about stability and what's happening with the other side and stuff like that. So, I think isolated machines are a great tool for, whatever the goal is of a certain individual, whether you're a beginner, whether you're somebody that's injured or whether you're more advanced.
The jump rope.
Ooh. Oh gosh.
So there's a lot of, so it's interesting.
I can only do 4 passes.
The first reaction. So, I guess if I went back, like my experience with jump ropes was probably much the same as my first experiences would probably be much the same as a lot of experiences. Like we did this on the playground as a kid. Like at some point we were introduced to a jump rope. Now there's almost no playgrounds left. I mean, I just walk around and kids aren't moving like they used to. And I don't ever see kids jumping rope, even when we pick the 10-year-old up from school or whatever. I just don't see.
So they figured out the jump rope is shit. Is what you're telling me.
I think there's probably a combination of things there, but maybe they figured out what I figured out. I just hate jumping rope.
It sucks.
But I'm going to be honest. So jump rope came back onto the scene when CrossFit came back onto the scene.
Sure.
And why? Because the jump rope is a very effective tool when used properly with the right application.
Absolutely. And
you see very, very fit people using the jump rope. Jump rope was originally invented to have fun with. Right. It was a toy. The jump rope was like a toy. And then you saw it being used heavily in like the boxing world, like in martial arts, because we're talking about speed, agility, quickness, hand-eye coordination. There's some level of conditioning that comes along with it. It's awesome for cardiovascular health. Again, when used properly with the right application. But then we saw this thing start to pop up in CrossFit. Again, not blaming CrossFit for this again, at all.
You guys did a lot of good things.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff at CrossFit. It came in, and so people started picking it up, and because it was part of the regular workouts. Well, the challenge that I have with the jump rope, particularly for a newbie, is that most adults, after being inactive, sedentary, for as long as they've been in sedentary or inactive, when they get back into the gym, it's been a long time since they're on the playground, they get into this jump roping and all kinds of shit starts to rear its ugly head, from the feet to the knees, to the hips, to the back, all the way up into the shoulders. So when do you use jump rope? When is it appropriate to maybe get into jump rope, and how do you get started? Cece.
When do you use the jump rope? Do you want to use the jump rope? I guess that's the first question.
I think that's a great question because I honestly believe most adults do not need to be jumping around in order to get fit.
Exactly.
No,
right now,
there's so many other ways.
If they have certain goals, like, performance goals, or you need to jump rope for a CrossFit competition or whatever, you're trying to work on your power, vertical leap, let's just say contact time, whatever, with your
reaction
feet,
time with the
reaction
floor,
time. Then it makes a lot of sense. But most adults do not need to be jumping around. That includes boxes and any other goddamn thing that I see out there trainers doing. But anyway,
this goes back to the power podcast that we've already done. But like when you start having people that don't know what they're doing, and I don't mean that in like the sense of like you physically don't know how to use a jump rope. Like you don't know where your body's at in space, and you start adding these plyometric hard power movements, your body's going to do whatever it sees fit necessary to survive the least amount of energy. Right. So like whatever, if that's a shitty movement pattern, it's not a good movement pattern.
Yeah. And it's just repetitive, which is the other bad part if all of those things are in line. So I don't know if he took some of that thunder.
No, I mean, I think you have to be able to learn to, can you jump and absorb force with the landing before you start doing a jump rope? Because if your knees are coming to the midline every single time, wow, what are you setting yourself up for? What types of foot issues have you had in the past? Because if you've had plantar fasciitis in the past and then you start doing jump rope, I mean, is that going to be setting you up for another case of plantar fasciitis? I mean, so however, let's just say you're conditioned, you're a runner or you're physically active and you want to start jumping rope. Well, then you know what? It's kind of just like running. You do a little bit and then you see how your body feels and you just gradually increase over time. And maybe it's, a 10% jump. So let's say, okay, I'm going to do 50 jumps today, jump ropes, and then see how I feel. You know what? The next day, your calves are probably going to be sore. So you're probably not going to jump rope that day. But you know what? Maybe on day 3, you're feeling pretty good. You're feeling refreshed. Okay, so I'm going to increase that by like 10, 20%. So that's 55 to 60. Maybe exactly, and then work your way up. If that's something that you want to do.
Right. I think that's the other part of it is don't feel like you have to jump rope to get into shape. And if you see it in a workout for the first time, you're walking into see maybe a group or, some type of a class where there's jumping rope and you haven't been doing that for a while. 2 things. First, do not try to complete that jump rope workout on day 1.
Yeah.
And secondly, you don't necessarily have to jump rope, right? There doesn't have to actually be a rope in your hands. Like you can like sort of mimic that you're jumping rope and doing it at a slower pace so that you're getting the action, the repetitive action without continually fucking it up. That is the rope hitting your feet or getting all tangled or whatever, so that you start to build the repetition and the endurance and the coordination and things over time. So yeah, to jump rope or not jump rope, that's to be, that's based on the individual. And for the people that were listening to CC talk about all the plantar fasciitis stuff and the things that happen at the feet, that will be another episode that we're going to handle here in a short period of time. We're gonna nerd out about feet. So all you people with feet fetishes, make sure you tune in for that one. Physio balls and even like break into the Bosu ball. These were uber popular. Let's go back 10, 15 years. I mean, every gym had multiples for as long as they lasted. It was
the foam roller of that generation.
That era. I think that's a good way of looking at it, actually. I mean, we have a ton of them here that we use them for specific application. But when they first came out or first started being popularized, you were seeing all kinds of stuff, being done on Physio balls. And then the Bosu ball came out. And I'm not going to get into who invented these things and come out. I'm acutely aware of the people behind these pieces of equipment and how they made it to the space and whatever. So I don't want to talk about any of that. I just want to talk about, hey, where do they fit in? Where do they not fit in? So first thing I'll say about Physio balls is I think they have a ton of really great application, particularly for a beginner who's somebody who is just coming into the space, who is maybe working through a lot of body weight type movement, needs just more movement, mobility, and strength with their own body weight or manipulating their position in space. The ball can be an awesome place to do that. And so can the Bosu. Particularly when we talk about start looking at things that are happening at the trunk, at the pelvis, the low spine, thoracic, and cervical spine, things that we can do to support the body, but still apply enough pressure or load to get some progressive overload to then ultimately graduate into some of the more difficult movement patterns, or more complex movement patterns.
So it might be more of a stability movement.
I think that's what people kind of think of when they think about Physio balls and Bosu balls. Yeah, it's starting to put together the pieces of, all right, now I'm creating this a little bit more unstable environment, but that's not why I use it. I use it to create a stability. It's not the ball I'm thinking about. It's how I can put the person or the client in a position to create stability, right? And the ball doesn't have anything to do with it outside of it. It's a modality to get them horizontal, but not completely horizontal to the floor. Some type of horizontal position or whatnot.
Supine, slight stability.
Supine, prone. Yes, and maybe create a little bit of feedback for somebody to come at it. What I still see are the fucking circus tricks that are still are happening in the gym. And I think that's steered a lot of people away from using these things, these pieces of equipment in effective ways. And I also think the knowledge of what you can actually do with the ball is now started to kind of go away. Like for a long time, people forgot how to lift fucking weights. Yeah. I was like, can we lift some weights here?
It was all about
all we're doing calisthenics and
push-ups onto the ball with
all kinds of stuff. So I think we're starting to move its way back in, but beginners, and even more advanced people, but specifically for the beginners, what's a good kind of starting application to get the benefits from using Bosu or Physio ball? The Bosu being like, people have seen this, looks like the ball cut in half or like in a quarter with a hard platform on the bottom. Yeah. It can be stable. It can be flipped over and the hard plastic is up, or it can be flipped over and the bubble is up. Cece, you got any tips for people?
For beginners with the stability ball and then Bosu. I think one of my general rules is, if somebody can't be stable on the floor, I'm not going to, and they don't have good body awareness, chances are I'm probably not going to use them, put them on a stability ball on an unstable surface. Mm-hmm. However, what you said earlier, as far as using a stability ball to help them create tension so that they are stable to do a particular exercise, then yes. But still, even for that, they have to have some kind of body awareness to be able to get in that position. Let's just say, a single arm or dumbbell chest press with a stability ball, they still have to be able to sit on the ball and roll the ball underneath them and have the coordination to move their feet out to then also get the dumbbells up. Unless they have a coach that can help them with that. But still, doing that type of exercises, can teach somebody to create tension throughout their body, to be able to control the dumbbells in their movement pattern for the exercise that's being done. I think it's also really good if you're trying to teach individuals how to move their body segmentally. And when I say segmentally, the first example that comes to me is teaching somebody how to move their trunk separate from their hips. So let's just say doing a crunch and recruiting those abdominal muscles instead of necessarily their hip flexors, right? And be able to pull their torso up through that range of motion versus recruiting their hip flexors to pull them up. But then also to be able to control the motion down back to where their trunk is horizontal or even below parallel
and a little bit of extension.
Into extension.
In a safe way.
In a safe way, right. To learn how to use their body concentrically and eccentrically through a range of motions. So you're having control and not just using momentum to help you sit up and then go back down.
Yep.
I think, a lot of individuals have a really hard time separating their top half of their body from the lower half of their body. So, sometimes a Physio ball is really good for that. I actually used a Physio ball, a smaller Physio ball with one of our clients the other day to do a cable rotation, a transverse cable rotation, because he kept pulling with his arms and he wasn't, there's a variety of different ways to do a cable rotation, but what I really wanted him to do was really think about using the top half of his body and stabilizing with his lower half. And what he was doing was he was pulling with his arms to give like a false rotation versus the rotation coming from the trunk. So what I basically had him do is I had him hold the Physio ball and then I had him hold the handles of the cable and then rotate.
So he's hugging the ball.
He's hugging the ball.
Effectively.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So they're good tools and good cues that way. But I really like what you did in terms of breaking it down and helping somebody to understand how to create tension to be stable. Mm-hmm. And so that can be very, very important for a beginner. And it's also, there's some complexity that goes into that. You're not just going in to do an abdominal crunch. What the term Jeff used earlier was intention, and being very intentional about how you're moving segmentally through the body. Very important to understand that as a beginner. Can be a very valuable tool, but as I mentioned before, it can be used and abused in kind of a weird kind of way.